On a cold night in Los Angeles, as a light drizzle fell, the gas station lights cast a glow over the wet streets. Barron Trump, known for his kindness off-screen, stopped to refuel his motorcycle. It seemed like just another ordinary moment, until something made him pause. A young, pregnant woman, visibly exhausted, moved back and forth between tasks, carrying heavy boxes and filling gas tanks without rest. She barely had a second to catch her breath. What happened next left everyone at the station speechless. Barron's unexpected gesture would completely change her night in a way no one could have predicted. Get ready for a story that will warm your heart and inspire hope. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you love stories of kindness and humanity, be sure to like and subscribe, because tomorrow we have another incredible story to share with you. A light drizzle fell over the quiet streets of Los Angeles, turning the pavement into a glistening mirror under the neon lights of a small gas station. The red and blue glow flickered against the wet asphalt, casting long shadows as the occasional car pulled in for fuel. For most, this was just another late night, but for Emily, it was survival. At 7 months pregnant, Emily moved between the fuel pumps with practiced efficiency, wiping windshields, checking oil, and refueling cars. Her uniform, slightly oversized for her growing belly, did little to shield her from the cold. Each movement sent a dull ache through her lower back, but she pushed through, forcing a polite smile for every customer. Under the station's awning, a small girl sat on a plastic chair, her legs swinging slightly above the ground. Sophia, Emily's 8-year-old daughter, was curled over an old sketchbook, a short red pencil clutched tightly in her fingers. The blue and yellow pencils beside her were equally worn down to small stubs, despite their dull edges. Sophia drew with quiet determination, filling a page with a scene only she could truly see. The low hum of an approaching motorcycle cut through the damp air. A sleek, black, arch bike rolled smoothly up to one of the pumps. The rider dismounted with fluid ease, pulling off his helmet to reveal slightly damp, tousled hair. Barron Trump. He took in his surroundings, just another late-night stop at a quiet gas station. But as he glanced toward the pumps, his gaze caught on Emily, her breath visible in the cold air as she wiped down a windshield, exhaustion lining her face. His eyes shifted toward the small girl beneath the awning, completely lost in her drawings. Curious, Barron stepped closer. His boots tapped lightly against the wet pavement as he crouched slightly to get a better look at the sketch in front of Sophia. It was a simple but carefully drawn scene. A kitchen, warm and full of life, pots steaming, a table set, and a counter with a blank sign above it, as if waiting for a name. Barron smiled. "Do you like to draw?" he asked gently. Sophia looked up, startled but not afraid. She hesitated before giving a small nod. "I draw places," she whispered. "Places I want to go." Something about that answer struck Barron deeply. He didn't know why, but as he looked at her finished sketch, he had the sudden feeling that this night was about to become something far more important than just another stop for gas. Emily exhaled slowly, pressing a hand against her lower back as another wave of pain radiated through her body. She had been on her feet for hours, her uniform damp from the misty rain, her limbs aching from the endless cycle of wiping windshields, pumping gas, and forcing a polite smile. There was no room for exhaustion, no space for self-pity, only the steady, relentless push forward across the lot. Sophia sat curled under the gas station's awning, still sketching in her tattered notebook. The light drizzle made the air heavier, colder, but the little girl hardly seemed to notice. Her focus was unwavering as she shaded in the details of her imagined world, her fingers smudged with lead and color. Emily stole a glance at her daughter between customers. Does she understand? Understand how hard things are? The thought gnawed at her, the guilt pressing against her ribs. Sophia never complained, never asked for more than Emily could give, but that only made it worse. The deep rumble of the motorcycle was still present, an unfamiliar presence lingering at the station. Barron Trump had finished refueling but hadn't left. Instead, he stood nearby watching. He wasn't staring in a way that made Emily uneasy. It was different, observant, thoughtful, as if he saw something deeper than just a gas station worker and her daughter. Emily felt his gaze as she turned to grab the squeegee for the next windshield. She ignored it. Famous or not, he was just another customer and she had work to do. Yet Barron didn't leave. Instead, he shifted his attention to Sophia. He crouched down beside her chair, What are you drawing, Sophia? His voice was calm, gentle. Sophia hesitated, gripping her red pencil tightly before turning the page toward him. A restaurant, she said simply. Barron studied the sketch, the tiny kitchen, the carefully drawn steam rising from the pots, the empty sign waiting for a name. It looks warm, he said thoughtfully. Like home. Sophia nodded. It's where Mama cooks, or where she would cook if we had a place like this. Emily froze at her daughter's words. A deep pang hit her chest, an old dream, buried beneath years of struggle, suddenly resurfacing. She turned back to her work, swallowing hard. Barron, however, didn't look away. Something in Sophia's quiet hope stirred something inside him. He glanced back at Emily, watching as she moved with the weight of someone carrying far too much. And for the first time that night, he wondered what he could do to change that. The rain had slowed to a misty drizzle, clinging to the cold air as Emily wiped down another windshield. She moved slower now, the strain of her pregnancy pressing against her body with every stretch, every bend. She could feel Barron's gaze on her, but she kept her focus on the work. Sophia, still sitting under the awning, colored in the last details of her restaurant sketch. Occasionally, she peeked up at her mother, worry flickering in her young eyes. Barron finally broke the silence. Do you do this every night? Emily straightened, surprised by the question. 2 nights a week, she admitted, tightening her worn jacket. And I clean offices in the mornings. Barron nodded slowly. And when do you rest? A short, humorous laugh escaped her lips. Rest? I shake my head. There's no time for that. Bills don't wait. And with the baby coming, I have to work even more. Barron's expression remained calm, but there was something in his eyes, something deeper than sympathy, understanding. It shouldn't have to be this way, he said quietly. Emily stilled for a moment before turning to him, her gaze sharp, yet her voice held no anger, only a tired acceptance. I made choices that brought me here. Complaining won't help, Sophia. I just have to keep going. Listening quietly, Sophia placed her small hand over her mother's. You do everything for me, Mama. Emily's expression softened as she squeezed her daughter's fingers. Because you're all that matters, sweetheart. Barron observed them both, the love between them evident, but he also saw the unspoken exhaustion in Emily's posture, the hidden sadness in her eyes. He hesitated for just a moment before asking, if you had one chance, just one, to do something different, what would it be? Emily blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth and closed it, looking away. I don't think like that anymore. Barron leaned slightly forward. Why not? Because dreams don't pay rent, she muttered. Sophia, still gripping her pencil, looked up. Mama still cooks, even though she makes the best lasagna in the world. Barron smiled at Sophia before turning back to Emily. You've wanted a restaurant, haven't you? Emily's shoulders tensed for a moment. She didn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she admitted, yes, once. Barron watched her carefully. He saw something flicker, something buried deep, but not gone. And at that moment, he made a decision. I'll be back tomorrow. The morning air was crisp as Emily finished stacking the last of the windshield cleaner bottles behind the counter. Another long shift was over, and exhaustion clung to her like the dampness in the air. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her growing belly, already preparing for another day of endless motion. She hadn't expected him to come back, but as the low rumble of a familiar motorcycle echoed through the lot, she felt her breath hitch. She turned just as Barron Trump pulled into the same pump as the night before. He dismounted with an ease that contrasted sharply with the heaviness in Emily's limbs. Sophia, who had been doodling on the back of an old receipt, perked up at the sound of the engine. Her eyes widened in surprise. Mama, look. Emily wiped her hands on her apron, trying to mask her uncertainty. Why is he back? Barron approached with a calm smile, carrying 2 large paper bags in his hands. Good morning, Emily, he said as she folded her arms over her chest. You actually came back. Barron set the bags down on the counter. I said I would. Sophia leaned forward, curiosity lighting up her face. What's in there? Barron smiled. Why don't you take a look? The little girl hesitated for only a second before carefully peeking inside. Her gasp was instant. A pristine box of colored pencils, untouched and brand new. She lifted it out of the bag as if it were made of gold. Pencils, Sophia whispered in awe. She clutched them to her chest, looking up at Barron with wide, grateful eyes. Thank you, mister. Emily, however, wasn't as quick to react. She glanced at the other items, groceries, a few warm clothes for Sophia, and felt a lump form in her throat. "I can't accept this," she murmured, shaking her head. Barron placed an envelope on the counter before she could protest further. "This is for rent, just this month. And there's one more thing." He handed her a slightly crumpled flyer. Emily found a moment to read the words carefully. "Culinary course for single mothers. Scholarships available." She looked up, disbelief and hesitation wearing on her face. Barron's voice was steady. "It's not charity, it's just a push." Emily swallowed hard, staring at the flyer for the first time in years. She felt something unexpected. The flyer sat on her small kitchen table, its edges slightly curled from where she had gripped it too tightly the night before. She had stared at it for hours, reading the words over and over as if they would change her life. "Culinary course for single mothers. Scholarships available." It felt surreal. Sophia sat across from her, carefully sharpening her new colored pencils. Every now and then, she would glance up at her mother, sensing the quiet storm of emotions on her face. "Are you going to do it, Mama?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Emily let out a slow breath, her fingers tracing the edges of the flyer. "I don't know." Sophia frowned. "But you love cooking." Emily swallowed. "I did, once." Reality had crushed every dream beneath overdue bills and exhaustion. She had used to imagine a small restaurant of her own, a cozy place where families gathered, where meals were more than just food. They were warmth, stories, love. She had buried that dream a long time ago, but now someone had unburied it. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. She knew before opening it who it would be. Barron stood there, hands in his pockets, his usual calm expression unwavering. "Did you think about it?" he asked. Emily crossed her arms, still unsure how to feel about all of this. "I don't get it. Why do you care? You don't even know me." Barron met her gaze. "Because I see someone who deserves more than just surviving." His words hit deeper than she wanted to admit. Emily hesitated. "I don't have time for dreams anymore." Barron's lips twitched slightly, almost a knowing smile. "Then maybe it's time you make time." A long silence stretched between them. Then, from behind her, Sophia spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "Mama, please." Emily turned, meeting her daughter's hopeful eyes, the same eyes that watched her work late nights, that saw her come home exhausted but never complaining, that believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. She looked down at the flyer one more time. "Maybe, just maybe, I could try." Emily took a breath, then met Barron's gaze. "Okay." The months that followed were unlike anything Emily had experienced in years. The culinary course was more than just learning new techniques. It was a rediscovery of something she had once loved. Every time she chopped an onion, simmered a sauce, or plated a dish, she felt something wake up inside her. A part of herself she thought had been lost beneath exhaustion and struggle. Sophia was her biggest cheerleader, always waiting eagerly for Emily to come home and tell her what new recipes she had learned. "Did you make lasagna today?" she would ask excitedly, her small hand gripping a colored pencil as she continued drawing her dream restaurant. Emily would smile, feeling lighter than she had in years. Not yet, but soon. Through it all, Barron had remained a quiet presence, checking in every so often, not in a way that made Emily feel indebted, but in a way that reminded her she wasn't alone. She didn't know why he had chosen to help her, but she no longer questioned it. Then, one morning, Barron asked her and Sophia to meet him. She hesitated at first. "What now?" "I've already been given more kindness than I know how to accept," she thought. But there was something about his tone that made her curious. When they arrived at the location, Emily frowned in confusion. It was a small building in a quiet part of the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but something about it felt warm. Barron stood outside waiting, his usual calm smile on his face. "What is this?" Emily asked, scanning the storefront. Barron didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped aside, revealing a sign above the door. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Lena." The words were elegant yet simple, just like the way her grandmother used to cook. She took a step forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the glass. Barron's voice was gentle. "It's yours." Emily turned to him, eyes wide, disbelief written all over her face. "What do you mean?" Barron's smile softened. "I mean, this is your chance." Sophia, standing beside her, practically bounced in excitement. "Mama, it's your restaurant." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving, she was dreaming again. The scent of garlic, basil, and freshly baked bread filled the small restaurant, wrapping the space in warmth. The once empty building was now alive, tables neatly arranged, soft lights casting a cozy glow, and a kitchen that finally had a purpose. Emily's restaurant. She could hardly believe it. In the kitchen, her hands steady as she layered fresh pasta sheets into a deep dish, each one coated with rich, homemade sauce. This wasn't just food. It was a piece of her heart, her past, and her future. Laucha Denona had been more than just a dream. It had been a longing buried beneath years of hardship. Now it was real. Out in the dining area, Sophia sat proudly at a small table near the front, a stack of menus in her hands that she had drawn the cover design for herself. A cozy kitchen, steam rising from the pots, the restaurant's name written in childlike, careful strokes. Customers trickled in, their curiosity soon replaced with delight as the first plates were served. Some were neighbors who had watched Emily struggle at the gas station. Others were drawn in by the inviting aroma drifting through the open door. Barron sat quietly at a table near the back, watching it all unfold. He had no intention of being the center of attention. This was Emily's moment. As she finally emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, she spotted him and smiled. Walking over, she placed a plate of lasagna in front of him, the same dish Sophia had always claimed was the best in the world. Barron took a bite and nodded his approval, quiet but sincere. Emily sat down across from him, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked around, taking it all in, the laughter, the conversations, the life within these walls. "I never imagined I'd be here," she admitted, her voice filled with quiet awe. Barron glanced around the bustling restaurant and then back at her. "But you deserve to be." She smiled, warmth filling her chest. "I'll never forget what you've done for us." Barron shook his head. "You changed everything, Emily. I just gave you a little push." As she looked at Sophia, happily chatting with a customer, Emily realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Months had passed since the grand opening of Laucha Denona, and in that time, Emily's life had transformed in ways she never thought possible. The restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It was a place of warmth, of community. People came not only for the food, but for the feeling that filled the small space, a sense of belonging that Emily poured into every dish she made. Sophia had blossomed, too. She greeted customers with a bright smile, handing out menus she had helped design, her colored pencils always nearby. She had stopped hesitantly asking for things or worrying about whether her mother was too tired to smile. Now, she believed in her mother, in their future, in the kindness of the world. And Barron, he still came by, always quiet, always watching from his usual table near the corner, never taking credit, never asking for anything in return. One evening, as the dinner rush slowed, Emily sat down across from him with 2 steaming cups of coffee between them. "You always sit at the same table," she noted playfully. Barron smiled, glancing around. "Best spot in the house. I can see everything." Emily followed his gaze, taking in the laughter, the warm conversations, the life in the room, her restaurant, her dream. She looked back at Barron, her expression turning serious. "I don't know how to thank you for this." He shook his head. "You don't have to." But Emily wasn't done. "I will never forget what you did for me and Sophia, and I'll make sure to pay it forward." Barron's lips curved into a knowing smile. "That's all I could ever ask for." A moment later, a soft tug at Emily's sleeve made her turn. "Mama, look what I drew." Sophia beamed, holding up her latest sketch. It was a drawing of the restaurant, complete with steaming plates, happy customers, and a large sign outside with the words "Lachina" in bold letters. Emily felt her heart swell as she pulled her daughter into a hug. Barron stood, leaving a few bills on the table. "I think it's time for me to go." Emily frowned. "Why?" Barron smiled, his eyes kind. "Because this place is yours now, and it's time for you to keep writing this story." And just like that, he walked away. But Emily knew his kindness would stay with him forever. The evening air was cool as the last customers trickled out of Laucha Denona, their laughter still lingering in the cozy space. Emily wiped her hands on her apron, exhaustion settling into her bones. But for the first time in a long time, it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from purpose, not struggle. Sophia sat at a corner table, her colored pencils scattered around her latest masterpiece. She had drawn the restaurant once more, this time adding a new detail, a small plaque on the wall, one she had carefully labeled in her neatest handwriting, "For those who believe in second chances." Emily smiled as she ran a hand over her daughter's hair. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Sophia grinned. "It's for him." Emily didn't have to ask who. Across the room, Barron sat at his usual table, quietly watching the space he had helped create. His coffee sat untouched, as if he were simply soaking in the moment. Emily walked over and slid into the chair across from him. The soft hum of the kitchen was the only sound between them. For a moment, "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Barron gave a small nod, his expression calm. "It's time." Emily swallowed, her fingers tracing the rim of the coffee cup in front of her. "I'm not sure how to do this without you." Barron smiled, his voice steady. "You already are." She looked around the restaurant, her dream now alive and thriving. The people, the warmth, the sense of home she had built. Barron leaned forward slightly, his gaze thoughtful. "This place is more than just a restaurant, Emily. It's a reminder that kindness matters, that dreams are worth chasing." Emily exhaled softly, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You changed my life." Barron shook his head. "You changed your life. I just gave you a reason to believe again." A long pause stretched between them. Then, with a final nod, Barron stood. He reached out, giving Sophia's drawing one last glance before heading toward the door. Emily watched as he disappeared into the night, knowing she would never forget him, and knowing deep in her heart that she would carry his kindness forward, because that was the way real change began. The sun rose softly over La Cha Denona, its golden light streaming through the front windows and casting a warm glow over the wooden tables. The restaurant smelled of fresh bread and simmering tomato sauce, the kind of comforting aroma that made people feel at home the moment they stepped inside. Emily stood behind the counter, rolling out dough for the day's first batch of pasta. Her movements were steady, confident, so different from the woman she had been months ago, struggling to make ends meet at a gas station, too exhausted to even consider the what-ifs. Now, her life had turned into something new. Across the room, Sophia sat in her usual spot, adding the final touches to a new drawing. This one was different. It wasn't just a picture of the restaurant. It was a picture of Emily standing proudly in the kitchen, a plate of lasagna in her hands, her smile wide and full of life. Sophia looked up, her small voice filled with pride. "Mama, you look so happy in this one." Emily's heart clenched, but this time, it wasn't from sadness or worry. It was from the overwhelming realization that her daughter had drawn something true. "I am happy," she whispered. The restaurant door chimed as a woman stepped inside hesitantly. She looked tired, her jacket too thin for the cool morning air. A little girl, no older than Sophia, clung to her hand. Her wide eyes scanned the room. Emily recognized that look instantly. She had worn it once. Stepping forward, her voice warm, she said, "Good morning. Can I get you a table?" The woman hesitated. I don't have much. I just wanted to see the menu." Emily glanced down at Sophia's drawing, then back at the woman. "How about this?" she said gently. "You both sit down, and I'll bring you something warm. No charge, just a little push." The woman's eyes shimmered with quiet gratitude as she led them to a table. Emily glanced toward the empty seat where Barron had once sat. Her heart was full. She didn't need to say goodbye. His kindness was still here, and now it was her turn to pass it on. This story is about more than just Emily, Sophia, or even Barron Trump. It is about the quiet power of kindness, the way a single act, no matter how small, can change the course of someone's life. Too often, people are trapped in cycles of survival, too exhausted to dream. But dreams matter. They remind us of who we are, of who we want to become. And sometimes all it takes to rekindle a lost dream is one person who believes in us when we can't believe in ourselves. Barron didn't give Emily a handout. He gave her an opportunity. He saw her when the world overlooked her. He reminded her that she was more than just a mother working late nights. She was someone with a story, a passion, and a purpose. And the most beautiful part? Kindness never stops. It ripples outward, reaching places we never expect. Emily paid it forward, just as Barron had done for her. And that's the lesson. Believe in dreams, show kindness, and whenever possible, be the reason someone else dares to hope again, because that's how we change the world, one act of kindness at a time. If you love stories about kindness, resilience, and the power of small actions to change lives, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories that remind us all of the goodness in the world.